The look on Uncle Brian's face was worth every all-niner. Every skeptical smirk, every time I wondered if I was making a mistake over the past 7 years. But let's rewind. My name is Natalie Tran, and I've never taken the easy road. While my cousins were off chasing MBAs in New York and London, I stayed in Austin, working full-time at our family-owned pharmaceutical packaging company, Solaris MedTech. At night, I took online courses in systems design and industrial automation. Not because I couldn't go to Stanford, I got in. But I believed innovation didn't have to come with a 6-figure tuition bill. I knew the future of pharmaceutical manufacturing wasn't going to be won by legacy methods. It would be revolutionized by precision engineering, predictive AI, and automation. I needed both hands-on grit and technical depth to lead that change. "Still tinkering with your YouTube degree?" Uncle Brian would joke, striding past the break room. He became CEO after my dad, his older brother, passed from leukemia in 2018. The 15% stake left to me was considered a formality. "Our reputation is everything," he'd remind the board. "We don't gamble on half-baked ideas from the warehouse." But I was paying attention. While they chased vanity partnerships, I studied pain points, delays, defects, waste. I worked in silence. When I debuted my patented modular automation system, one that reduced error rates by 82% and tripled throughput, they couldn't ignore the results. The board didn't just take notice, they shifted direction. I wasn't the girl with the internet degree anymore. I was the woman who rescued Solaris from stagnation. They called it Brian's company. But they forgot my father built it. They forgot those shares came from vision, not inheritance. I never forgot. And I never stopped building. For 3 years, while the rest of the company labeled me the gadget-obsessed kid, I worked in silence, carefully, deliberately, on something I knew could shift the industry. By day, I was just Natalie Tran, a mid-tier process analyst buried in QA at Solaris MedTech. By night, in my small East Austin duplex, I was engineering a future no one else could see. I called it HELIX, Hybrid Efficiency Learning and Intelligence Exchange. Not just another automation script, HELIX was an adaptive, AI-driven infrastructure system. It could forecast production failures before they occurred, recalibrate batch sequences in real time, and streamline resource distribution across multi-site operations, all while exceeding FDA compliance metrics. I filed the patent under my name alone. Uncle Brian had never asked me to sign any IP agreements for Offmeyer's work. He thought my little coding projects were harmless hobbies. That oversight would come back to haunt him. The same week the patent cleared, Solaris was in free fall. A rival firm launched a machine learning optimization system, slashing production costs across their entire line. Our clients started calling. 2 major contracts were on the verge of walking. Uncle Brian called for an emergency board session. I sat near the back, calm, while he stammered through vague reassurances and buzzwords about leaner workflows. My cousin Tyler, fresh off his MBA and already installed as COO, flipped nervously through his notes. They had no idea 3 batches had already failed regulatory review, but I did. I flagged them myself. "Before we pivot," I said clearly, breaking the tension, "we should discuss the root cause of the failures and a viable fix." Uncle Brian stiffened. "Natalie, this isn't your moment." I stood slowly. "No, but it's the moment you need me." From my bag, I pulled out the patent, my name bold at the top, and connected my laptop to the projector. "Let me introduce you to HELIX, a fully operational AI system I've been quietly piloting in one of our off-grid test suites at the South Austin facility." Uncle Brian's face drained of color. "You did what?" he snapped, his voice rising. I smiled. As QA implementation lead, I hold written clearance to deploy limited scope testing protocols. You signed that policy update yourself last quarter. The screen behind me flickered to life. Live metrics, predictive diagnostics, efficiency readouts. HELIX, in motion. For the past 90 days, this platform has been running shadow mode alongside our legacy systems. Let's examine the outcomes. Slide by slide, the numbers told the story. 47% drop in per unit cost. 95% reduction in human error incidents. Real-time regulatory compliance adjustments with zero flagged anomalies. This isn't a patch, it's a transformation. Tyler shot to his feet, his voice cracking. There's no way this is accurate. It is, I said steadily. The FDA completed a surprise audit just last Thursday. I have their initial findings here. Uncle Brian slammed a hand on the table. This is a breach, completely unauthorized. Actually, I said, projecting the contract clause on the next slide. Everything was executed under standard internal protocol. As for the patent, it's under my name alone, not Solaris's, not yours. Gasps rippled through the boardroom. Confusion gave way to murmurs, heads turned, chairs shifted. We could commercialize this, one investor murmured. This deserves its own venture arm, said another. I caught the glint in their eyes, not just profit, but possibility. Uncle Brian looked stunned. Tyler deflated. And I stood taller, not just heard, but finally seen. Sometimes, the best form of justice isn't an argument. It's standing your ground while those who dismissed you realize they were never in your league to begin with. I ended my presentation. My father built Solaris MedTech with purpose. I intend to evolve it with precision and vision. Judging by the board's response, they were no longer looking at me as a background player. Not the niece, not the technician, but Natalie Tran, the future of Solaris. A board member raised a hand. Do you really believe outside firms would pay for this tech? They already have, I replied smoothly. As of this morning, I've received interest from 3 major healthcare tech conglomerates. Silence fell. They're especially intrigued by the fact that Solaris doesn't own the intellectual property. Uncle Brian shot up so fast his chair scraped loudly across the floor. This is absurd. You built this while under our roof. That system belongs to the company. No, I said, my tone cool. I built every line of code, every circuit, in my personal space. On my nights, with my equipment and my financing. I held up the patent documents. This technology is registered solely to Natalie Tran, not Solaris MedTech. And since you never considered my work valuable, you never requested an IP assignment agreement. My legal team has it all on record. I clicked to the final slide, a dual projection of Solaris's projected trajectory with and without HELIX. The gap was stark. Without it, we fail FDA recertification within the year. Our rivals are outpacing us. We're running obsolete systems. With HELIX, I said, pointing to the sharp upward curve, we don't just recover. We lead the next decade. Just then, the boardroom doors opened. 3 sharply dressed visitors stepped in. Uncle Brian's fury faded into something worse. Allow me to introduce David Chin from Merck, Sarah Williams from Moderna, and Thomas Rodriguez from Genentech, I said, gesturing to the visitors as I smiled. Each of them has expressed formal interest in acquiring the HELIX patent. I invited them here today to observe its real-time performance. Tyler rose from his chair, voice cracking with panic. This is a confidential shareholders session. You can't just bring in outsiders. I can, I replied calmly, lifting a worn leather folder. As a stakeholder, I'm entitled to invite external observers for any non-confidential demonstration. It's outlined in the governance bylaws. The ones my father wrote, I added pointedly. The visitors nodded politely and took their seats, eyes glued to the projection screen. So here's the choice, I said, stepping forward. Solaris MedTech can license HELIX. You'll retain use, but under a market rate contract. Or, I turned toward the 3 biotech executives. I accept one of their offers that don't come with red tape or boardroom politics. Uncle Brian slammed the table. This is extortion. No, I said evenly. This is strategy, the kind you said I'd never grasp with my irrelevant online degree. I held up a final document, clear, thorough, and ironclad. This is my formal offer. Exclusive licensing rights, on my terms. What terms? A board member asked, leaning forward. First, I said, locking eyes with them, a restructured board, one that represents innovation over entitlement. My father's legacy wasn't fear, it was foresight. Uncle Brian's jaw tightened. You want my title? No, I said, I want the one I've earned, Chief Technology Officer, with a permanent board seat. Silence fell, tension thickened. Tyler finally asked, and if we reject it? I nodded to the visitors. Then I walk, my patent, my system, my call. An elder board member, Mr. Finch, my father's closest ally, cleared his throat. Brian, the board needs to vote. Now. Brian looked around the room. No allies, no way out. The end of his reign had arrived. This isn't over. Uncle Brian spat, his voice shaking with fury. Actually, I said calmly, it is. I gave a subtle nod to my attorney, who stepped forward and handed each board member a sealed envelope. What now? Brian snapped, already on edge. The results of an internal audit I commissioned 3 months ago, I said. It uncovered multiple discrepancies in our compliance records. Discrepancies that began the same quarter Tyler was promoted to VP of Operations. Tyler's face drained of color. Brian tore open his envelope. The full findings have already been submitted to the FDA and Department of Health, I continued, voice steady and clear. So, here's your choice. Accept my licensing offer, or explain to federal regulators why our internal logs don't match your submitted reports. The room erupted. Some whispered urgently. Others began flipping through their reports in disbelief. I stood still at the front of the room, watching as the old system, built on intimidation, secrecy, and ego, crumbled under its own weight. My father once told me, don't shout them down. Outlast them. Outbuild them. As the board called for an emergency vote, I glanced at the glass panel beside me. For the first time, I didn't just see my father's reflection in mine. I saw his approval. 6 months later, I stood in what used to be Uncle Brian's office, now mine, overlooking the streamlined production floor at Solaris MedTech. Below, HELIX operated smoothly, coordinating real-time adjustments, predictive analytics, and seamless batch automation. Since its full rollout, output had increased by 250% and our stock price had tripled. We weren't just surviving, we were leading. The office door opened. Maria Espinosa, our new VP of Operations, stepped in with a confident smile and a thick folder in hand. The FDA inspectors just left, Maria said, eyes sparkling. They called Solaris the new gold standard in biotech manufacturing. They're even considering modeling future compliance frameworks on our system. I smiled, the memory of Uncle Brian's voice echoing faintly in my mind. How he once claimed my weekend hobby would ruin the company's credibility. He'd been wrong. About the tech, about me, about everything. The fallout after that fateful shareholder meeting had been swift and unforgiving. The board voted unanimously to accept my proposal, not only because of the patent, but because the audit laid bare the truth. Tyler had falsified operational reports for months. When regulators completed their review, he was charged with multiple counts of fraud. Brian's failure to intervene had made him culpable too. He resigned within the week, his reputation in shambles. Did you see the Wall Street Journal today? Maria asked, handing over the paper. The headline blared. Solaris MedTech sets industry benchmark. Shares soar after AI revolution. And beneath that, in smaller type, former CEO Brian Tran, under federal investigation over data breach. I skimmed it and set it aside. Brian wasn't my concern anymore. My attention was on the future, like the launch of the Mintron Innovation Fellowship, named for my father, to support aspiring biotech engineers from underserved communities and non-traditional academic paths. My phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Sarah Chin at MIT. Her team was interested in expanding HELIX into cell therapy and CRISPR optimization. 5 years ago, I couldn't even get a reply to my emails. Now, they were requesting collaboration. A knock at the door pulled me back. To my surprise, it was Aunt Helen, Brian's sister, and someone who had remained quietly distant through all the family politics. "Natalie," she said, voice hesitant, "do you have a moment?" I motioned for her to sit. She paused at the threshold, unsure in a space that once belonged to her brother. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly, "for what you did, for my son." Liam, Brian's youngest son, had always been the outlier in the family. Quiet, curious, and more interested in circuitry than stock tickers. He'd been studying robotics engineering online for years, carefully keeping it from his father. After the leadership transition, I discovered his application tucked away in HR, rejected, at Brian's request. I brought him into the systems integration division. Now, Liam was thriving. "Liam earned his role," I said plainly, "just like everyone else here." Helen's eyes brimmed with tears. "Brian was wrong. About education, about you, about what leadership really means." She paused, voice softening. "Your father would be proud." "Would he?" I looked around the office. No more mahogany desk, no outdated hierarchy. The space was filled with light and energy. Digital dashboards, prototype schematics, team photos spanning ages, backgrounds, and disciplines. My dad's principles, integrity, persistence, and fearless innovation, lived in every blueprint on these walls. A soft chime came from my desktop. HELIX had just resolved a temperature drift in one of the formulation bays. Quiet, precision. Another reason I never regretted the path I took. "How's Brian?" I asked, though I already knew. Industry news tracked his every misstep. His latest consultancy had just folded. "He's reflective," Helen said gently. "The investigations changed him, maybe for the better. He's starting to see that the world doesn't run on ego anymore." And she was right. The Laris MedTech wasn't just a family legacy. It was a global biotech force, valued at over $2 billion, 0 cents. With industry leaders licensing our platform and students across the world applying for our fellowships. My assistant buzzed in. The quarterly board meeting was about to begin. Helen stood. "I read about your father's scholarship program," she said at the door. "Brian saw it too. He never said a word, but I think, deep down, he finally gets it." After she left, I made my way down to the floor. No one looked up. That was a good sign. They were focused, proud, driven. Liam was there, carefully calibrating one of HALIX's real-time feedback modules, fully in his element, exactly where he belonged. Liam's framed degree in robotics engineering hung proudly above his workstation, earned online, just like mine upstairs. "How's the calibration?" I asked, as I walked by. He grinned, eyes alive with focus. "Almost too perfect. Just the way we designed it." XOLIX suggested a micro-adjustment to a sensor array, improving yield accuracy by another 3%. I watched as it recalibrated in real time. It still felt surreal that the sketches I once taped to the walls of my rented duplex had evolved into a platform, now studied by MIT and used as a regulatory model by the FDA. The future of biotech manufacturing sparked by a woman with an online degree who simply refused to believe her education did. Back in my office, I opened a drawer and pulled out a relic. Uncle Brian's old nameplate. Brian Tran, CEO, heavy brass, thick lettering. I dropped it in the recycling without a second thought. My own nameplate sat on the desk, sleek, modern. Natalie Tran, Chief Technology Officer. Beneath it, laser-etched in tiny script, was the first line of code I ever wrote for HELIX, back when it was just a dream and some late-night lecture notes. The quarterly board meeting would start soon, another groundbreaking quarter to report. But first, I fired off a quick email to the scholarship program coordinator. Double the slots for next year's online degree scholarships. And add this line to the application. No education is worthless when paired with vision. Because the real victory wasn't in dethroning anyone. It was building something better. Success isn't about pedigree. It's about purpose. And no tradition ever started without someone first challenging the status quo. As I headed to the boardroom, I passed our mission wall. Solaris MedTech, where innovation meets integrity. And below it, in silver script, education is never worthless. Vision is priceless. My father had been right all along. If this story spoke to you, share your journey. Comment below, tell us where you started, who doubted you, and how you proved them wrong. Subscribe for more stories that remind us you don't need permission to change the world, just purpose.